Hello and welcome again. My name is Matty D, and this is Networks Equal Yes, a place where every network task is achievable. For this video, we're going to place ourselves at layer 2 of the OSI model and configure VLANs between a Junos device and a Cisco IOS. By the end of this video, you should be able to configure a working VLAN on two switches and have them trunk together. You should also be able to have two devices connected to these switches in the same VLAN and be able to ping one another. So let's dive in and start the network adventure. So the first thing we should ask ourselves is, what is a VLAN? Well, a virtual LAN is a logical overlay network that groups together a subset of devices that share a physical LAN, isolating the traffic for each group. Now that's a mouthful, so let's break it down in layman's terms to better understand what a VLAN is. A VLAN is a virtual network within the physical network, and this network only allows traffic to traverse within the virtual network unless configured to send traffic elsewhere. This can be done with things like default gateways and intra-VLAN routing, but that's for another lesson. For today, we want to create a flat network with only a single VLAN configured between two network devices. Before we begin, I want to discuss some VLAN options in the physical interfaces themselves. The first of these options is the access option. When configured on a physical interface, the access option allows a computer to use a VLAN configured on the interface to move traffic forward within that VLAN, thus making the physical interface an access port. A sub-option when configuring an access port is configuring a specific VLAN for the interface to send traffic through. In this example, we'll use VLAN 10. The other option we have available is the trunk option. This allows us to share VLAN information from one switch to another so that they may communicate via Ethernet using particular VLANs. There are two sub-options here under the trunk configuration. The first is a switch port trunk allowed VLAN option. Now by default, a trunk port will send all VLAN information from one switch to another. But if I want to restrict how many VLANs I send between switches, I can do this here. The second sub-option is the encapsulation option. This simply specifies how data will be encapsulated going across the trunk. And in most network devices, you don't have to specify this, but in some older Cisco IOS technologies, you do. So you got it? Great. Now let's snap our fingers and get to networking. Okay, so before we get into the actual configurations, I just want to show you the network as a whole. And you'll see right off the bat that there's actually a layer 2 and layer 3 going on within this network. And the reason that is because the computers themselves don't have the capability to communicate solely at layer 2. So they have to communicate at layer 3. However, the switches will communicate at layer 2 and there will be no layer 3 information on them whatsoever. This is part of the encapsulation and de-encapsulation process. And really how it works is that the computer NIC card first creates a packet at layer 3. And within that packet, there is going to be, well, I'll say network information. Packet wouldn't be accurate here, but network information that contains both layer 3 and layer 2 network information. And when it sends that forward to the switches, it's then communicating via Ethernet, which is working at layer 2. And then after it goes through the Ethernet process, it'll go to the other computer, which at which point in time, the de-encapsulation will essentially then bring back up the layer 3 information so that the two computers connected via the switches will then be able to communicate at layer 3.
Alright, so before we get into the actual configuration of the switches themselves, I want to talk to you a little about the computers that I have connected to these switches. One connected to a Junos EX switch, and the other is connected to a Cisco Catalyst 3560. Now, what I've done on each computer is assigned a unique IP address, a unique private IP address that I should be able to communicate with the other across the flat layer 2 LAN. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the IP address I've assigned here. As you can see, it's 192.168.1.2. Now if I ping that, that's responding, right? So what I'm saying is that my NIC card is currently operational and is able to receive layer 3 packets. Now if I try and ping the other computer though, which will be .3 in this network, you'll see that I get a timeout or a destination host unreachable because essentially the layer 2 portion of this has not been set up yet. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to the Junos and start configuring there to get this up and running. Alright, so now I'm in my Junos EX device, and the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and set up the VLAN. So I'm going to go ahead and type in edit VLANs. So you can see right there that it put me into the VLAN category or VLAN directory, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and name my VLAN. So we're just going to call it test, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, oh I'm sorry, I forgot to put set. Always got to put set, guys. Set test, which is my VLAN name, and then I'm going to say VLAN ID is 10. Alright, it's as simple as that. So we're not putting any kind of IP address associated with this because we're strictly at layer 2. So the next thing I need to do is associate it with an interface. Two interfaces actually, one for my trunk and one for my access switch. So let's go back to top, and then I'm going to do my edit interfaces. So I'm going to go ahead and make GE000 the access port that goes to my laptop. And then I'm going to make GE001 the trunk port that goes between the switches. So let's start with the port that goes to the laptop. So in this case, it'll be set GE000 unit 0 family Ethernet switching. Now remember, if I was doing layer 3, it would be iNet. But in this case, we're doing layer 2, so it's Ethernet switching. Then I'm going to put in interface mode access. And then I'm going to put in VLAN members. Let's do this actually. Test. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and commit it here because if you remember right, no configs take place until you actually can run the commit command. So in this case, when I went and typed in test, it didn't automatically pop in there because it wasn't technically committed to the config. So when we set the trunk, you will see that it will automatically pop in there now. So we're just going to wait a second for this to commit. Alright, so now that we've committed this, let's go ahead and set up our second interface. So set GE001 unit 0 family Ethernet switching, because again it's layer 2, interface mode trunk VLAN members, and we're going to say T, and you'll see it now pops in there. Also, if I hit question mark here, you'll see my options, which is all and test, or an open set of values. But in this case, we're just going to use test because that's the only thing that we need to go across because it's a flat network, layer 2 network. All right, so I'm going to commit it once more. And as this is committing, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my Cisco Catalyst switch now. Alright, so now I'm in my Cisco Catalyst switch, and I want to do the same thing here. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say interface, actually, let's go ahead and set up the VLAN first. I'm going to say VLAN 10. Alright, so this puts me in the layer 2 VLAN right here. If I put in interface VLAN, that would put me in intra VLAN routing. We don't want to do that, so we just want to make it strictly layer 2. So in this case, we're going to say VLAN 10. Alright, and then we're also going to say no shut here. And simply say it's already not shut down, but essentially it's just good best practice to put that in there just in case. Alright, so once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here, and then I'm going to go into my interface GI101. Alright, so in this case I'm going to put 101 as the access port going to my laptop, and the other one is going to 102 will be my trunk port going to the other switch. So let's go ahead and put this as a switch port, and it's going to be access switch port mode access, and then switch port access VLAN 10. Right, so we're specifying here that this is an access port, and it's an access port that's going to be using VLAN 10 to go from the switch to the trunk to the other computer, right? So we've done that. So now we need to configure the trunk. The trunk will allow the VLANs to pass information between the two switches, all right? So we're going to go to interface GI 1/0/2. Again, it's a switch port mode trunk, all right? And we're going to say switch port trunk. Oh, that does get in the way sometimes. Don't worry about it, but we're going to get around it. All right, switch port trunk allowed VLAN, and we're going to say 10, right? Saying that only VLAN 10 is allowed to go across this trunk. Now, we could have just not put that in at all, and it would allow all VLANs to go through. But we're trying to show best security practices here, which is to limit the amount of VLANs that go through your trunk, depending on what you're trying to do and where it's going, all right? And then again, we're just going to do a no-shut here, just to make sure. All right, so the important thing to remember here before we actually switch over back to the laptop to make sure it's up and running is to check our actual trunks, all right? So, and all our layer 2 switching. So what we're going to do here is we're going to exit out. We're going to say show interface trunk, all right? Now, if you look here, you're going to see that port G102 is on using 8021Q and is trunking with a native VLAN of 1, all right? And then allowed on that trunk is VLAN 10. All right, so that tells us that our trunk is up and running, okay? And it's saying, here we go, right here. This is the important part. Is forwarding, right? We want to make sure it's forwarding. As long as it's doing that and it's tagged with VLAN 10, we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over back to the Junos, and we're going to check it there, and then we're going to switch over to the laptop. Okay, so we've confirmed that the trunking is good to go on our Cisco Catalyst switch. So let's go ahead and confirm it now on Junos. And the command we're going to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go top here, is run show. Now I'm only putting run in because I'm in config mode. If you're not in config mode, you don't have to do that, but in config mode you do. So run show interface, oops, not interface, Ethernet switching, okay? And you can also put it down to the interface. So in this case, let's do interface GE001. And you can see here, I have VLAN member test, which is tagged with 10, and it's a state and forwarding, and it's tagged. So that's good, right? That means that VLAN 10 is being shared between these two switches, even though they're two different brands of switches and two different types of switches. The VLAN can be passed among them both, and we can establish a flat layer 2 network. So if everything is configured correctly, I should be able to open up my command prompt. Okay, let's give me a few spaces here. And as before, I was able to ping .3. And I should be able to ping .2, and there it is. So now you're seeing that these two laptops connected to two different switches are able to ping each other via layer 2 and Ethernet, and it's on a flat layer 2 network. Now in later videos I'm going to show you intra-VLAN routing, which is essentially a way to have multiple VLANs all communicating each other using a combination of layer 2 and layer 3. But this, in case you're looking for a simple local area network, is an effective way to have your computers communicate with one another. And as you can see, it's across two different switching devices, one being a Cisco Catalyst and the other one being Junos EX. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you can join us for our next exercise here on Networks Equal Yes.